Good evening, all of my true crime fans. I thought tonight's video would be relaxing to kind of use a spoolie. I have started 2 new series for both Patreon and YouTube, and they are going to be Lost in the Night and Lost in Paradise, or possibly Gone in the Night or Gone in Paradise. I have left that up for my Patreons to vote on. Again, over there you get to vote on the content you want to see from me for $3 extra a month. I'd love to have you. It's always been down in the comments. We, really have started a community over there, and you're always guaranteed a video over there, even if I don't get to record like a true crime video over here, because I don't always record true crime on YouTube. I have a lot lately because a lot of you have wanted to see that more, but it will be more on my Patreon. So anyway, I'd love to have you. Today's case is literally about someone who got lost in the woods, possibly. Her case is kind of all over the place. There's a lot of different stories and a lot of speculation. There's several different stories. It's kind of confusing, and it wasn't a case I was really familiar with until I saw it. So today's case is about 25-year-old Samantha Perry, who went missing from Graves County, Kentucky. And, again, her case is kind of all over the place. There's like 2 days that are listed as her being missing. Possibly March 27th, 2018, which is when another witness claimed to have seen her that morning. Also, the 28th of March 2018, and this is the day that is claimed by these 2 questionable people in her case, who were with Samantha, or say they were with Samantha. Police questioned that she was seen on the 28th, but we'll kind of get into all of that. Samantha was described as a strong-willed and stubborn person by everyone who knew her. When she set her mind to something, there was no going back. She was doing it. She pretty much said what was on her mind, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. She was confident, outspoken, and a force to be reckoned with. So she had got married and ended up having 2 children. She loved her children, and she wanted to give them the best possible life that she could. Samantha was very close to her family. She would see or speak to her family members at least once a day. They often picked on Samantha for being a bad cook, but they admired her green thumb. Her mom always said Samantha could turn any plant into a masterpiece, which is amazing because I will say that I do not have a green thumb at all. Can't do it. Samantha's life was not always easy. When she was a teenager, she got caught up in drugs, and it really became a problem for her. She had a great family who were able to get her into rehab and kind of get her back on the right track. She was sober for 6 years up until the point that she went missing. I'm not sure at what point she relapsed, but she unfortunately fell back into this. And it public interview done by Ren, Samantha knew him her whole life, and they grew up in the same area. She was really close to his sister, and she used to, like, I guess, sneak in to his sister's window, and they would, like, all hang out together. They dated on and off when she was a teenager before she got married. Now, Ren's family had a really bad reputation, and, you know, they just were known as sketchy people around Samsonia and pretty much every county in the area. They were known for heavy drug use. They cooked and used meth and marijuana, and they were also known for being thieves. They would break into like different sheds in the county, kind of going from home to home, I guess, breaking into sheds. They also had some accusations from women saying they were sexually assaulted by a lot of men in the family, including Ren. And according to Ren, Samantha didn't have any contact with him after she got married, and he had not spoken to her in years until one day she randomly popped up in his Facebook Messenger right before her disappearance. They met and they kind of picked up right where they left off, and they began to date again. Ren said they spent every single moment together. It's possible he may have been living with her in Murray, but we don't know that for sure. I'm pretty sure, according to some of the things that were said, but it wasn't really confirmed. He said the only time they were separated was the night she went missing, and another time when she had went to court for this custody battle with her children. Samantha was last seen by friends and family around Samsonia the early morning of March 27th, 2018, and into the day of the 28th, their family had been trying to contact her and calling her phone. She wasn't answering, and this was completely unlike Samantha because she did speak to her family every single day. She was in constant communication with them. So that night, her mom called her place of employment, and, you know, she had asked them, you know, if anybody had talked to her, anything like that, and come to find out, she never showed up before her 9 p.m. shift, which was completely unlike Samantha. She was a very reliable worker. She never really called out. When Samantha had still not made contact with anyone, her parents reported her missing. Her parents were aware that she had been struggling with drugs again, and like the first time, they were there to kind of pick her up, and they were going to help her get into rehab, but unfortunately, she went missing before that could ever happen. Unfortunately, right off the bat, her disappearance was not taken seriously because she had this history of drug abuse. Graves County Sheriff's deputy told them that she was most likely on a bender and would eventually just show back up. They kind of just laughed in the family's face and just pushed everything away. But her family knew something was wrong, and authorities should have too, because the day before, on the 28th of March, Ren Hendrickson, her boyfriend, was also reported missing. On the 28th she was worried about him and someone needed to go check on her son. According to Ren's mom, he was on the side of Dunes Chapel Road, and he, had called her. He was like telling her that he was going to take a bunch of pills and he was going to go into the woods and basically kill himself. Authorities heard this and they didn't even go to search for Ren that night because Ren had a history, and one of those things, he was considered a danger to police. A few times he had been armed during interactions with authorities. They felt it wasn't worth going out into the woods, checking for this person who might possibly be armed. I guess they just didn't want to check it out. I don't know, but they didn't. So the entire day of the 29th, no one was searching for either one of them until the night when Samantha's car was found, abandoned on the side of Dunes Chapel Road, where Ren claimed he was going into the woods to basically take a bunch of pills and kill himself, which I find completely bizarre. Around the same time as the car is found, Dusty Holder, Ren's biological father, reported Samantha missing, and he told a very interesting story to police. He told police he had been with Ren and Samantha on the night of March 27th. He claims they came over to Paul Holder, his brother's house, who was Ren's uncle. We're unsure if Dusty lived there or not. That wasn't really something that I could find, but they came over to the house, and Dusty was at this house, and this house was off of Tim Road, and I'm going to insert the map here. It was Dunes Chapel Road and Tim Road are about 2.2 miles from each other. Dusty says Ren and Samantha came over and they had either been arguing or got into an argument. And for some reason, this made Samantha storm off towards the tree line at the back of the property. And Ren got into Samantha's car and left to go stay at her apartment without her, which I don't really understand, but I don't know. According to Dusty, when the couple split up after the fight, he got onto a four-wheeler and rode out towards Samantha. When he got to her, she said, "Hey, you're on a four-wheeler. I want to go four-wheeler riding." So she hops on the back and they go for a ride in the woods. He said when they got out in the woods, which is known as Taylor Bottoms, I'm going to insert a picture here too. This is a very swampy area, especially in the springtime, which it was there. There had been a lot of rain and flooding, and there is a creek that flows through it. When they got out there, they ended up getting stuck and lost, according to Dusty. They decided instead of trying to walk back to his house, they were just going to stay on the four-wheeler for the night, and it was raining. It was pretty chilly that night. It was like in the 50s or possibly the 40s. They kept the four-wheeler running, and Dusty kind of put his jacket over it, and they were trying to have some warmth. They kind of huddle under this jacket, and when the four-wheeler eventually ran out of splits off into 849. This location is only about a mile away from the house that they had been at. He said when they got on this road, he suggested that they go to the nearby Taylor Mart to warm up because they were soaking wet and covered in mud. They, had just had a really rough night. But for some reason, Samantha said no, she was going to walk to some family member's house nearby. And Dusty claims he went north to the Taylor Mart and Samantha went south on 131, and that was the last time he saw her. Once authorities had this, very strange story, and Samantha's car had been found, they decided to finally search for her on the 30th. At this point, she had been missing for about 3 days. They already knew something was wrong based on their actions, and they immediately called in a third party for help. Now, nobody knows who this third party was, but according to authorities, it was someone who grew up in the area. They were called in to kind of help search for the four-wheeler. So, Simpsonia is this very small town with lots of wooded areas and farmland, and you don't know the area unless you grew up there and, had lived on all of this land. And this is a specific area of Taylor Bottoms. A lot of people did hunting and four-wheeler riding, and this individual knew this area like the back of their hand. So while this unknown person is out searching for the four-wheeler, Dusty was brought in to be questioned by 3 deputies and a detective at the county sheriff's department. He basically stuck to his story. They kind of stayed the same. He said he last saw Samantha the morning of the 28th walking south on 131. They were able to find that Dusty had gone to the Taylor Mart that morning, and his state was, what someone who had been in the woods all night would kind of be like. But there was no Samantha. He didn't mention her while he was at the Taylor Mart, but there is an issue with this. The time he claims that they came out of the woods when the sun came up and would have been about 7 a.m. This is right around rush hour, which Samantha's family has pointed out several times. 131 was a very important highway. It basically cut this county in half, and it was what everyone used to get to and from, work and everywhere else. School buses, and basically a lot of people would take this road. Not a single person called in to say that they had seen Samantha. While it's not super uncommon to, see a woman walking down the road, it does seem like it would be kind of strange to see a woman walking down the road covered in mud and soaking wet. At this point, Dusty was told by authorities to go, to lead them out to where the four-wheeler was, and they wanted to kind of corroborate his story. But while they were out searching, this unnamed individual you were out riding four-wheelers in the middle of the night. Something doesn't add up about that. It's very bizarre. Like, why are you trying to burn these two phones? And I don't know if these phones were like able to be got out and looked at. I didn't see a whole lot of information on that, but I'm assuming that they were too burned. But I guess for them to get into, I don't know. There was also only one set of footprints around the four-wheeler, and when they tracked these footprints out of the woods, there was only one set coming out. I've also seen a report where it said Samantha's keys to her car were beside the four-wheeler. But other than the keys, there was nothing to make authorities believe Samantha was ever there. There were no footprints or a spot where Samantha could have been laying. While all of this is happening, Wren is still nowhere to be found. Apparently, the media had been reporting Wren and Samantha had walked into the woods and not Dusty and Samantha. So again, there's so much, misinformation in this case and so many different stories that you really don't know what to believe. I do want to say that I did as much research as I possibly could. I'm just stating that now. But there is so much. Just saying. That same day, authorities managed to get a warrant to search Dusty's home in Murray, where Wren had allegedly stayed the night of the 27th. I'm sorry, I think this was Samantha's home, not Dusty's home. From Graves County and Callaway County, where Murray was served the warrant, they took several items from the home. They have not stated what those items were, but they were sent for testing at the Kentucky State Lab. The family did state that there was blood found during the search on the ceiling of Samantha's home. There's not a lot of information on this, but even if that were true, authorities wouldn't have said much about it anyway. At this point, Dusty's story is not adding up, and there's nothing to prove Samantha was ever there. There wasn't ever really a search done for Wren himself, and according to authorities, there was another search on the 1st of April, and again, they went to Taylor Bottoms. Still no sign of Samantha or her ever being there. That night, something bizarre did happen, though. Wren stumbled out of the woods on Dim Road. He was dehydrated and hypothermic, and he said he had been in the woods for about 5 days. When he walked up to this house, we're not sure what house it was, but he walks up there and he was immediately taken to the hospital and treated. The following day, he was taken to the sheriff's office for further questioning, and the main difference between Wren's story and Dusty's story on the night of the 27th is that Wren never speaks about a fight. He doesn't mention ever getting in a fight with Samantha, and still to this day, he doesn't mention ever having a fight with Samantha. He actually tells about 3 different stories, and according to the internet, which I don't know if these stem from the media. I mean, the media have been reporting false information anyway, but, were they fed this by authorities? Did they just make assumptions? We don't know. But this, is what makes this case so frustrating. So the most common story is that Wren says on the 27th was an argument that led him to leave on the 28th, and he comes back to the house where Dusty was, and Dusty basically tells him Samantha is missing. After hearing this, Ren flips out, loses his mind. He leaves the house. He made it 2.2 miles to Dunes Chapel Road, and this is when he FaceTimes his mom, and he's saying he's basically going to kill himself. He also told his mom all about Samantha being missing and says he believes Dusty is responsible for whatever happened to her. So I've also seen versions that say he was over by the house with Dusty and Samantha, and he was really messed up on drugs, and he went into the woods, and when he came out, that's when he learns that Samantha is missing. This is a very vague, story, and I don't really believe this because it doesn't add up, but there are other stories that include Paul Holder, Dusty's uncle, being there that night, which is very interesting because you don't see this a lot. And Ren claimed in the interview, which is linked in the description, I'm going to link it down below, because it is like a 2-hour, I believe, interview, but you guys should watch it. It's very interesting. Or it's like over an hour long, something like that, but it's just extremely long and a very interesting interview, and you guys can tell me what you think down below. But according to Ren, him and Samantha had a normal day that day, and they decided to go over to his uncle's house to hang out with his dad, Dusty. He said something about doing drugs at the bridge, which is possibly this bridge that is on 131, but he didn't really go that deep into it. He said that he was just doing drugs at the bridge, and he went to his dad's house. He said when they got there, everything was fine. He doesn't mention argument, but he did say at one point he got on the phone to get more drugs. And while he was on the phone trying, to buy more drugs, Samantha walks up and she's like, hey, while you're on the phone, I'm gonna go four-wheeling with your dad. Now, a lot of people find this abnormal, but according to Ren, that's all people in this area did. They drank, got high, and rode four-wheelers. He said after the phone calls, he was just kind of sitting around waiting for them to, get back. And after about 10 minutes, he decides to get in Samantha's car and basically go back to her apartment without her. But there is also another story included within this story that after about 10 minutes, his uncle, Paul Holder, came to him and ended up kicking him out, saying that he was too high and he wanted him gone, basically. Ren claimed that, he got into Samantha's car to go home, and he ended up immediately going home, which I'm guessing was Samantha's apartment, because he didn't want to just leave Samantha there, and she left his phone in the car. And he did a couple of big loops. And if you look at this map, there are some really big loops in the area. He said he passed by the house like 3 times, hoping Samantha would be out there and ready to go home. But by the 3rd time, he had to stop and head back to Murray because he was running low on gas. And he said he had also noticed on this 3rd time that the garage behind the house was dark and locked up. He said he doesn't know if they came home and was following day, on the 28th, he said something about needing to borrow money for gas so he can get back to Paul Holder's home. He claimed he was on the way to the house when someone was following him. You know, he did say he was high and he thought he was tripping basically, but he said after a while he realized someone really was following him and it was making him super paranoid. In this interview, he says someone had been following him and Samantha for weeks, but you can't prove any of this, you know. He said that he was being followed. By the time he was about to reach Dunes Chapel Road, he was, you know, about to run out of gas, and he didn't get much money from whoever he had got gas money from. We don't, again, know if this is true or not. I mean, was he high? Was he tripping? Or was someone really following him? He was like, I gotta pull over, you know. He claims he was super scared and he didn't know what these people were trying to do to him. They were revving their engine, so he jumps out and runs into the woods. This is when he makes this call to his mom and says he's basically gonna pop a bunch of pills and kill himself. And while this seems strange, it is definitely possible his family was heavily into selling and using drugs, and he could have owed somebody, or he could have just been tripping. We don't know. At this point, he's saying he didn't know Samantha was missing, and he ran into the woods because he was being followed. Now, when you look at this map, it's a very small section of the woods. It would be almost impossible for him to get lost for 5 days, you know, like he had been claiming. And according to Ren, the reason he was in the woods 5 days was because the pills had knocked him out, and he said he only woke up one time in the middle of the night, and he didn't know where he was, and he just eventually passed back out. He said when he came out on the 1st was when he made his way out of the woods, or when he came to on the 1st. This is when he, like, makes his way out of the woods. And he knew and remembered that he had ran in there and someone had been chasing him, but he had no idea which direction he had ran in. He was just confused and didn't know if he had just blacked out or what. When he asked someone for help, he said he was like 86 degrees after he had sat in front of a stove warming up for about an hour, and then they took him to the hospital. He says it wasn't until he got to this hospital he learned Samantha was missing. According to Ren, the police came in and said, "Where is Samantha?" And he's like, "What do you mean, where is Samantha? Where's my dad?" You know, because the last person he remembers to be with Samantha was his dad. You know, he remembers them leaving on the four-wheeler. Ren says when he got out of the hospital, he, you know, goes and talks to police, and he tells the same story, and then he goes to ask his dad where Samantha was, and according to him, his dad said that he was asking too many questions and basically told him to shut up. And Ren got upset and was like, you know, if you got stuck, why didn't you call me? And his dad said he couldn't because he lost his phone, which we know is a lie because his 2 phones were in the fire, burned. What we don't know is if this came directly from the media or Ren himself. You kind of have to look at these stories and pick out the logic. Like, you know, if we go with the first one, Ren goes into the woods on the 28th because Dusty told him Samantha was missing. And he lost it. You know, this is the most common story that is told. Samantha wasn't reported missing by family until the 29th, and as far as Dusty knew, she went to be with family. And as far as he knew, she got to family and was okay. He didn't talk to her frequently, so why would he report her missing? And also, if he told Wren on the 29th that she was missing, why did he not report it? Or, if he told Wren on the 28th that she was missing, why did he not report it until the 29th? Either this story is made up, or Dusty is covering his tracks. So now let's say Wren did go into the woods, messed up on drugs, and for some reason came out and found out that Samantha was missing. This story could be plausible, but why were the keys found next to the four-wheeler? It doesn't matter which story you look at. If the keys were found by the four-wheeler, Wren didn't leave that night, and he didn't do the circles or go back to Murray, because the keys were with Samantha when she got on the four-wheeler. And, that is if she ever even got on the four-wheeler, because my thinking is she was never in those woods, at least not alive. But we will get more into that shortly. Another big question in this case is, why did authorities not start chipping away at some of these rumors, or dig deeper into this? So the keys were found by the four-wheeler, or not, because, if this is true, it would have discontinued everything that Wren said. There is some truth within some of these lies, and some of what Wren said did make some sense. It's common for everyone to go four-wheeling, but it's more likely Dusty and Samantha went four-wheeling while Wren was on the phone to pass time than it is that Wren and Samantha got into a fight and Dusty just rode up and was like, "Hey, do you want to go four-wheeling?" Because why would his dad ride up in the middle of them fighting and do that? I mean, that seems a little less likely, but I don't know. Dusty definitely knew these woods well, and he could have gotten out easily. Why wait in there all night? Wren, in an interview, said the four-wheeler was found in a very interesting place. There's something he calls a grudge ditch, which I'm not sure what this is, but he says there's this grudge ditch and then a creek, and the four-wheeler was in between both of those. According to Wren, at the time, you couldn't have gotten into the grudge ditch. So in order for the four-wheeler to get to where it was, they would have had to go up onto 131 and back down into the woods where it was found. That makes it less likely that they didn't know where they were, because they would have just been on 131 and could have walked out to the road. Come to find out, Samantha did have family nearby, but they were north and not south on 131, and Samantha's family made it very clear that Samantha grew up in this area. She knew this area well. She wouldn't have just stayed in these woods all night, and she most certainly wouldn't have walked in the wrong direction, because at this point it's daylight and she would have known where she was. I lost my spoolie, but everything was kind of pointing towards Samantha never being in the woods that night. Now, there was a search done on the house that they were at that night, but there's not a lot of information on this. There was some blood found in a car on the property, but again, not a lot of information. Samantha's family ex-husband. They brought in most of her family. All of them were cleared out. They were cleared. So it comes down to these bizarre stories and a lot of finger pointing. Authorities say they searched with helicopters and brought in cadaver dogs, and they rode on horseback. But Samantha's family questions if a lot of these searches were ever even done. Authorities say that the evidence they have found contradicts everything Dusty has told them, but they haven't really done anything about it. Authorities have done nothing to clear up rumors, and according to Samantha's family, there was this professional that was in the area. Now I'm assuming that it was a professional, like, maybe a retired detective or something, but not entirely sure. Anyway, they could smell drugs being made and someone cooking meth, and they called it into police. And police really wanted to get into this property, but when this call was made in, they didn't do anything about it. So it was like, why didn't you go when you had the opportunity? The sheriffs were really being questioned at this point, and this really bizarre thing happens. So 3 months in, when Graves County Sheriff Dwayne Redmond was charged with drug use and official misconduct, he was the one making all of the decisions on Samantha's case. He had been taking pain medication from the deputy's drop box, and he had pled not guilty, but ended up dying of natural causes shortly after. This could be a real conspiracy theory here, guys, and you could go down a whole rabbit hole with it, but the sheriff, it could be a conspiracy theory of the sheriff helping cover it up. There's no connection that has been made between Redmond and the family, and the pain pills is different than meth, but we may never know if he was involved because he did pass away. The new sheriff did announce that Samantha's case was going to be a top priority, and he claims he would do the best he could. Within a year of Samantha's disappearance, fresh eyes were on the case. The Graves County Sheriff Department presented the case to several agencies, but we don't know what came of this. There was another glimpse of hope when on March 2nd, 2019, authorities were out searching on Dunes Chapel Road and Bell Road. They were searching with canines, and the dogs alerted to an area. When authorities searched this area, they uncovered a bunker that had been dug into the ground and was hidden by a fallen tree. One officer goes into this bunker, and he gets into this very big room, and it was dug out and had decorations, a twin bed. It was crazy. And there was a man in there named Ernest Hendrickson. This is so crazy, but he was a fugitive that had been hiding there close to his family, basically using walkie-talkies to talk back and forth so they could hide him. Authorities were wondering if there were any more bunkers, or if this man might have information on Samantha. He didn't, because he had been incarcerated up until a month after Samantha had went missing, which means the bunker was empty when Samantha went missing. He had had a long rap sheet of crimes that included meth use and evading police. The list goes on and on and on, but he had basically been hiding out in this bunker from March 2018 to November possible Samantha was being held in one, and apparently they had searched this area several times before for Samantha and Ernest and never even found this bunker until this time. According to Samantha's family, they found a second bunker, so apparently there are more bunkers. And they found a lot of drugs in the woods. This proves this family knows the woods very well. Samantha's family had not stopped looking. They continued to search for her and even sit outside the tailor store on the anniversary of her disappearance. They have done some cash raffles to help raise the reward, and it is now at $10,000. Money is what makes people talk, right? There's a Facebook page where her family shares more of their theories, and it is called Bring Samantha Home. Sorry, it's going to be linked down in the description, along with all of the other information that I had shared. So it will be linked down below. I will link the numbers to call as well. If you have any information, please know you can remain completely anonymous. And money is what makes people talk, so please remember that you can remain anonymous, and if you know anything, please share it. Samantha had strawberry blonde hair, curly at the time. She was 5'7" and weighed 120 pounds. Graves County Sheriff's Office is again very interested in talking to anyone who has any information. Please, please, please call at 270-247-4501. Tips can also be sent to sperrytips@gravescountyky.gov. Again, that's sperrytips@gravescountyky.gov. This is an email address dedicated to the case. All of this will be in the description, and please, if you know anything, please, please, please share it. Thank you guys again so much for joining me for another case. This case gave me a headache because I was like, there's so much going on. What's the truth? We may never know, but I pray that our family gets some answers, some closure. Dusty, Ren, if you're watching this, it's time for you guys to tell the truth. While you may not feel guilty while you're high and stuff, when you come down, the realization of what you have done is going to eat at you. This was somebody's mother, and yes, Samantha may have relapsed into drugs, but those kids are still